Have you at some time or someone around you struggled with an eating disorder? I know it's a little bit of a triggering topic, but it's an important one to talk about because if this has been part of your journey or the journey of someone that you love, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Join me this week as I sit down with author Michele Mason and we discuss eating disorders and how it's common for them to resurface during the perimenopause and menopausal journey.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. I'm so excited to be joined today by author Michele Mason. Welcome to the show, Michele.
Thank you, Adrienne. And I want to say thank you very much for having me as a guest. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you and sharing with your listeners today.
So Michele reached out to me about being on Reproductive Rebel, and I was really excited about her very unique vantage point because it's a topic that I think a lot of people need to hear about. So Michele is a survivor of anorexia nervosa. And that is a topic that, I'm going to just put a little disclaimer out here at the beginning of the episode that I know that this topic can be triggering for some people. And I want to hold space for all of that. But I also really, truly believe that Michele, as an author who is talking about this topic and then is passionate about empowering other people around information and resources around this topic, this is just a really important episode to be able to share with everybody. So tell us a little bit about who you are, Michele, and the journey that brought you to becoming an author and doing what you do now.
Yes, well, it's been quite a journey. During the global pandemic is when I wrote my book, and it's called Annihilating Anorexia. And I'm a 44-year survivor of anorexia nervosa. I had a life-threatening case of it when I was 16 years old back in 1981. At that time, I was 5 feet 11 inches, as I am now, and anorexia took me down to about 96 pounds. And it's very serious. It's a very serious illness, and it's life-threatening, as it was for me. It has the highest mortality rate of all the eating disorders, about 20%, which is just horrible because that means 2 out of 10 will not make it. And so in 2021, literally 40 years later, the book just came out. I wasn't an author. I wasn't a writer by my profession. I actually worked in the pharmaceutical industry for decades. And so it just came out. And I'm like, okay. But what was really interesting is that was around the time that I was going through menopause. And also my parents had become sick and they passed away. And so it was, what you call the perfect storm. And I remember as I write in the book, I take readers through what happened before, what happened during, and what happened after. And readers will see that when you talk about puberty, when I was 16 years old and the onset of anorexia, they say that when it comes to an eating disorder, that genetics are the gun and environment pulls the trigger. And so I take readers through what happened to me, and this was 1981. The first eating disorder treatment center wasn't even created until 1985. So I went into a regular hospital, and then I went into the mental health ward of the hospital. So I was in with everybody, and no one would look like me, and no one knew what it was. And so I take readers through that and how I recovered permanently and what I learned along the way in terms of light bulb moments. And then fast forward 40 years, when my parents got sick and my mom passed away in 2017 and I dropped 10 pounds. And then my dad passed away in 2019 and I dropped another 10 pounds. And I remember getting on a scale thinking, this is a mistake. This isn't right. There's something wrong with the machine. And then I took my mom to the hospital. I'm like, I'll get on the hospital scale. That's got to be right. And it was the same thing. And I go, okay, what's going on? So I thought it was grief. And now that I have more time in the rearview mirror, this is 2025. I wrote the book in 2021. I published it in 2023. And now here we are, 2025. I've been doing a lot of reading and a lot of advocacy and so on. Well, come to find out that there is a little side effect of menopause that not a lot of people know about, not a lot of people talk about. And that is that eating disorders can resurface. And I think in my case, the way I would describe it is, oh yeah, I chalked it up to grief, but I think it could have been a combination of many things. And I do really think that it was the menopausal version of anorexia that surfaced. And I'll tell you why, because it felt like my appetite button just shut off. I had no appetite. And it was really weird. It was weird because when I was in puberty, I was starving. I was starving all the time. And this time I was like, didn't get hungry. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. I have bigger fish to fry. My parents are sick and, all that. But again, the power of hindsight and knowledge is power, and reading and researching and so on and so forth. I have come to learn that this is pretty common among women that had eating disorders in adolescence, that it can resurface. I believe anorexia is a neurologically brain-based illness. And so there's triggers. There's a unique profile to the brain of an anorexic that affects decision-making, habit formation. There's comorbidities associated with the anorexia. First and foremost, depression. There can be OCD. And this is all, neurologically based. And so I think, yeah, it makes sense. If you look at puberty and menopause as bookends of a woman's reproductive cycle, and there's unusual activity going on with the hormones, they're revving up or they're shutting down, and you're predisposed neurologically, it makes perfect sense to me that, yeah, at the end, it could come up again. And then I, put forth with the several curse words, and everybody has a burden. Everybody deals with something. And that's why it's important to be kind to people. But this is my burden and I manage it. And I'm a success story.
There's so much I want to unpack about all of this. So when Michele and I talked offline or in the screening process to figure out what do we want this episode to look like, where our messages aligned. And she was talking through her story about, she didn't know what was going on in puberty. This wasn't something that was really widely understood and communicated. I know that when I was going through school a little bit after that in the late 90s, there was a lot more of an open conversation around this kind of thing. But even then it was still hush, and you had to be in certain rooms in order to have this conversation. And it really struck me when she was talking to me about, then when I went through menopause, this resurfaced for me. And there were a few pieces that I thought would be really beautiful to kind of talk about in this episode as a result of all of that. And First and foremost, like when you're going through puberty, your hormones are going through this like roller coaster ride of change, right? Because your body is coming online into your cycling years. And perimenopause is that journey where that process kind of reverses itself. It's not apples to apples, but it's very similar. So when women say they feel like they're going through a second puberty, in some cases you are, or framing it a certain way, you are, where, instead of having your hormones coming into your bleeding years and your reproductive years, they are coming offline into your non bleeding years. And menopause is a rite of passage, the same way that the first period is for a young woman. And during this rite of passage, we do have a lot of neurological changes. So there's a lot of stereotypical, like, there's so many accounts on Instagram where they are talking about the roller coaster ride that is the emotional side of menopause. And, one moment you're a fire breathing dragon, and the next moment, like, you hate everybody and you want to be left alone. And then other times you feel like, this is a brand new chapter of a brand new life, and I'm turning over a brand new leaf and I'm embracing it all. Right. And all of that can coexist in the same body. But because these hormonal fluctuations are happening in the background that are changing the way that the body is expressing itself. And I saw a really interesting post the other day about how your mind is literally rewiring as you're going through this process because your hormone profile is changing as you're going through this process. It made me go, "Ah, uh-huh. Yes, it totally makes sense that a neurological based condition like anorexia nervosa would resurface itself." But it was something that had never really occurred to me, which is why I thought Michelle's story was so interesting. And I wanted to share it with you all. So, when you first started experiencing symptoms with anorexia, one of the things that stood out in our conversation to me was the fact that you didn't know what was going on. Talk to me a little bit about how that all felt to you as a teenager.
Well, I know that a lot of medical articles, and when you read about what are the symptoms of anorexia nervosa, one of the things is distorted body image. And here's another example of how anorexia nervosa is such a complex illness because for me, I didn't have a distorted body image. I looked in the mirror and I saw what was happening, and it scared the crap out of me because I didn't know what was happening. I just saw myself shrinking. And the illness is all about the control and the rituals and the safety and security that provides for a person. And keep in mind that your brain is still growing until you're 25 years
Mhm.
old. And so you get to the point where I say it's so important for outside help for someone that has anorexia because chances are, if they are a young person and their brain's still growing and their body's still growing, they can't trust themselves and they need someone to step in. But naturally, you'll fight it because you want that ritual and you want that control. That's like your lifeline. And so I would look in the mirror and I'd see myself shrinking. I don't know what's wrong with me. And nobody around me knew what was wrong with me. And I just got weaker and weaker. And it got to the point where I felt like all of my organs were having to work extra hard just to keep me going. Like it got harder to breathe and I could feel my heart, kind of pumping harder just to keep everything going. And it was just literally a struggle to get through every day because I had no energy. I ate nothing. But if I could have kept to those rituals and not lost any weight, I would have kept doing it forever. That's how bad it is. That's how much it takes over. And, they say where the brain goes, the body follows.
Yeah.
And if I could have kept doing it, doing my rituals and doing my stuff, and people that have anorexia know exactly what I'm talking about, I would have kept doing it forever. It was my lifeline because my environment, as I say in the book, things were out of control. And I felt like this is the one thing I can control. And so the distorted body image, no, not in my case. But it was terrifying what was happening. And so finally, my parents took me to the doctor, and it was a very pivotal moment because we went to the family doctor, and the doctor said, hold up your arms like a T. And he turned around and looked at me in the back, and he told my mom she has to go to the hospital right now. And that's really what saved me. I was in the hospital for 3 months, and I thankfully got better because here I am. It's so serious. It's not something you pick up from looking at fashion magazines. It's not something you do because your friends do. It's not a fad. It's a serious illness.
And now a break from our conversation for a partnership message. You've been told to hustle, grind, wake up early, and do more. But here's the truth. Rest is the most productive thing you can do. And the right kind of rest starts with Sia Silk Sleep Mask, your new sleep sanctuary. I've tried so many sleep masks, and I thought I just had to deal with the discomfort of slipping straps and light still getting through. But then I found this one, and I'm never going back. Made of 100% mulberry silk, it's the only mask that creates total blackout with its comfortable oversized eye cups that don't smush my lashes while feeling weightless on my face. My sleep, next level. This isn't just a sleep mask, it's an investment in your nervous system. Sia Silk is a women-owned small business committed to high quality and sustainable luxury. Check out the show notes for the link to grab yours and rest like you mean it. And now, back to the show.
So in my case, back in 1981, I do think that maybe ignorance helped me a little bit because I didn't know what it was. And when I got into the hospital, they put me on antidepressants. And there were a couple key people, healthcare providers, that took an interest in me and were kind to me and spent some extra time with me. And those two things really helped me get better.
So, with this information, fast forward to your menopausal transition. So, your brain chemistry is literally changing because your hormones are changing. But like so many of us in that menopausal stage of our life, we find ourselves in the care of others, whether it's late teenage children. I always find the irony in the fact that you're perimenopausal at the same time you have teenagers, and you're both going through hormonal transitions, which just seems like evolutionary rudeness to me. But you're also in that sandwich generation, right? Where you may be caring for young people at the same time you have aging parents. And parental care comes with its own mental load because these are the people who were your caretakers when you were younger. And now the roles have reversed. So sometimes there's a lot mentally around that. And then on top of it, you're going through your own biochemical transition. And all of a sudden, you start seeing these things resurface. So, when you were talking about that lifestyle, and if I could have survived and kept doing what I was doing, I would have kept doing it. Did you feel like that mentality had resurfaced for you at that point in time? Or were you just so busy in that caretaking role that like self-care started being put on the back burner?
Well, I did put the self-care on the back burner. I minimized the weight loss, especially after the first 10 pounds. I just minimized it to say, this is not something I want to focus on right now. And it never dawned on me that it could have been the eating disorder, because after 4 decades of living a life and doing my career and marriage, and, I have stepchildren, and I basically convinced myself it never happened. And I didn't want it to resort, dealing with it once is enough. Who would want to deal with it again? So self-rationalization, or I made excuses. It could be anything but that. And so I let the first 10 pounds slide, and then the next 10 pounds. And it was only until after I published the book and did a little more reading, because I started participating in a few activities for advocacy, like today. And I go, I need to be informed, and I need to, make sure that I'm on top of what's happening. And that's when I started reading about it. And I just started filling in the gaps. And so while it was happening to me, I really minimized it and trivialized it. I'm like, but I will say that it was interesting because the thought patterns returned. And
There it is.
and there was one moment where, when I got on that scale in the hospital, I go, oh, well, it must be right, because this is the hospital scale. And I saw it. There was this thought that came through that said, well, why don't you just keep going? Just keep going, you know? And in my book, I give anorexia a voice, and that's exactly what it says, that kind of a thing. Self-sabotage. Just keep going, you're going to be thin and everyone will love you, and everybody wants to be thin, and you can do it. I'll show you how. It's
Mm,
very seductive. And
mm,
so that little voice said, just, keep going. But when I was 16 and I had it, I was scared out of my mind. When I went through menopause and saw these things happening, anger, I got mad. And I go, oh, there's no way. No way. And to be honest with you, Adrian, just reading about it and reading about other women having this exact same experience just made me feel better, to
mm.
say that it is common to have the eating disorder at both bookends. And that's why I think education and knowledge is so important. One of the articles that I had mentioned to you that really helped me, that your listeners might be interested in, is an article in Women's Health magazine, and it's called "The Surprising Menopause Side Effects Everyone Needs to Know About."
Ooh.
And it's excellent. And it talks about a 57-year-old woman, Julie, who had an eating disorder in her adolescence, and she's 57 years old. And she says, I thought eating disorders were a young person's illness. And I
Mhm.
think even some women that go through this, even the doctors tell them that. They're like, no, it could be something else. And like you say, women have aging parents to care for, they have children, they have a job, and then they have all of these menopause things going through, and then brain fog is a big part of it too. And so just reading that article, which was published last year in Women's Health magazine, was very comforting and reassuring, because I go, okay, someone out there is doing some work on this to learn more and try to mitigate it for us who don't know this little piece of it. But hopefully after your podcast, more people will.
Well, that's the whole reason why I thought your message was so important, because that's the vision for Reproductive Rebel, is to be able to shed light on things that happen that we don't talk enough about, that there's not enough awareness around. And I mean, I work in this field. I am saturated and immersed in women's health. And you were the first person that brought this perspective to me of, hey, did you know? And I was like, oh man, no, I didn't know. I've worked with clients who have had eating disorders in their teens and early 20s, and I've helped them reestablish their cycles because a lot of times you lose enough weight that your period just stops and you stop ovulating. And so I've helped people to essentially nourish their systems so that their fertility comes back online so that they can have a family and, goals that they have for themselves. But I had never had anyone talk to me about the fact that this situation that many of my clients have dealt with in their younger years can resurface, does resurface in this next big life transition that will happen in their life. And it was so eye opening for me. I was like, I have to have Michelle on the show because this is important, particularly when you're looking at menopause, also because after 35, our muscle mass changes. After we're over 40, our bone density begins to change. And now let's throw on top of it a nervous system disorder or dysregulation. Let's call it dysregulation because you have demonstrated that you are a survivor, which means regulation is possible. But it really does start with awareness and knowing like what is actually happening in my system. And I think that it's critically important, no matter where you are in your journey right now, where you are age wise, knowing that if this has been a thread in your historical story, that there is a chance that it could resurface. And just having that awareness, you're able to be proactive, vigilant, aware that, when you first start seeing the signs before things get too far, maybe it's time to have a little extra love and support in this particular area.
The benefit, I guess, on having let's call it the reactivation at menopause is I know what it is. I'm older, I'm wiser. And again, I recognize it for what it is and I manage it. And one of the things that women my age struggle with, I'm 60 years old now. You go through menopause, and obviously, there could be weight gain because of the hormonal fluctuations and changes. And the way society is for women, they're afraid that they're going to gain weight in their middle age, old age, and they don't want to. And so, if you look at someone that has had a history of eating disorders, whether it's anorexia or bulimia or any of the other assortment of eating disorders that people struggle with and suffer from, you're gaining weight and you're getting older and, you're not young and thin anymore. And that's bad. And so it's particularly almost like a landmine for an older person to walk through, an older woman that's going through menopause that has a susceptibility or history of eating disorders to have that hit her. And then that can be the trigger for her to, well, I'm not going to gain weight because I don't want to be an old, person overweight. And then all of the tendencies come back and they manifest. And it's very risky. It's a fine line to walk, I would say. And it's impossible to block out all of the external, the social media and everything that says a woman should be beautiful and thin and everything. But the bottom line is that eating disorders are not a linear path and it can come back. And so, again, I look at it as just being hyper aware and just like any illness, just being hyper aware that you could relapse, especially during that period of your life, and to do what you need to do to take care of yourself, even with everything else going on in your life.
That's such a beautiful way to close out this episode. So, Michelle, if people want to get a hold of your book, can you share with us again the title, where they can get a hold of it? And if you have any resources or programming that you want to share with people, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. My book is called Annihilating Anorexia, and it's available on all online retailers. There's a paperback and there's an ebook that can be purchased. And I do hope that if people have an interest in this topic, they will check it out. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share my story and to share information because women, we are reproductive rebels and we deserve the best and we all need to take care of ourselves.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode, Michelle. Thank you for sharing your incredible story. And definitely go check out Michelle's book. There will be a link in the show notes so that you can get a copy for you or a loved one if this is something that speaks to you. And until next time.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.